Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menashe. Today's another AMA episode, that is, Ask Me Anything. I love to answer your questions, and if you have a question you think is going to be of broad interest, send it in. I'll answer it live on the air. Send your questions to victor@victorjm.com. That's victor@victorjm.com. Now, David in the Central Valley in California asks, Hi, Victor. I'm looking to develop a build-to-rent community of apartment-size single-family homes. They will go from unentitled vacant land all the way through to the sale of the built homes. My question is, at what point are the impact fees to be paid? Is it while performing the horizontal land development and utility hookups, or is it during vertical construction? Thank you. Well, David, this is a great question. For the listeners at home, let's take a minute to describe impact fees, or what in some places are called development charges. These are the fees that are charged to developers for the benefit of having the opportunity to make a profit from the expansion of a community. These fees are only assessed on new units that are added to a community. For example, if you demolish a house and replace that house with a new single-family home, you would not pay any impact fee because you're not adding any density to the community. If instead you replace the single-family home with a duplex, then you would pay an impact fee on the one additional unit and no fee for the existing unit that you're replacing. Impact fees pay for the municipal infrastructure, makes it possible for you to build your property. We're talking about the roads, the water infrastructure, sewers, schools, parks, public transit, community centers, expansion of policing, and so on. These fees vary widely from one community to the next, and they can vary widely within a community. Some cities have zero impact fees. Impact fees are extremely common throughout California where you live and in the Central Valley in particular. I read a recent paper on the state of impact fees in the Central Valley in California. I put a link in the show notes. This 84-page report was authored in 2019 and gives a pretty good overview of the issues surrounding development impact fees in the Central Valley. It specifically studied 10 municipalities in the Central Valley. It seems there's no consistent rule as to when these development charges are due to be paid. Some communities require the charges to be paid at the time you pick up your building permit. Others require the charges to be paid when you get your certificate of occupancy. You'll need to check with your local municipality to find out for sure. If your project doesn't require any zoning approval and it's small enough to only require a building permit, then it's probably the simplest case. Maybe you're subdividing a lot and building two houses. All of the infrastructure is there at the edge of the property, and all you need is a building permit. The assessment of the development charge should be pretty straightforward at that point. In the case of what you're describing as a greenfield development where you've got a significant amount of land development to be completed, you may be required to submit a subdivision plan and get zoning approval for a planned use development. This would include all of the roads, the traffic studies, the infrastructure that would need to be done prior to getting your project approved. Let's say that the nearest sewer hookup is a few hundred yards or a few hundred meters away, depending whether you like the metric system. You might be required to pay for the expansion of the sewer system yourself, since you're the one who needs it. But in that case, the municipality may give you a credit for the extra work performed and allow you to deduct the credit from your development charges. The study I'm quoting, the Turner study, highlights a number of problems with the system of development charges in the Central Valley in particular. There's very little consistency from one community to the next when it comes to the rules or the application of the rules. Only a little over a quarter of the communities actually published the studies that were used to assess the impact fees. This lack of transparency makes it difficult to determine whether the assessment of impact fees is fair. The schedule of fees was also not readily available in many of the communities. When you finally do get a hold of the schedule, determining which payment applies to you can be incredibly confusing. Often the preliminary feedback and estimates from the planning department doesn't match the final assessment of fees. The net result is that many developers have a hard time predicting the correct fee structure for their financial pro forma. In the absence of an accurate number, the only prudent thing to do is to estimate high and hope that the real impact fee comes in below your estimate. There's also a chance your project becomes unattractive with those high impact fees. You might end up talking yourself out of a project simply because the municipal government's doing a poor job of being transparent about their development charges. In some cases, the community may require you to build certain amenities, like a park, for example, as part of your project. This is usually in addition to the development charges, and if your property doesn't easily accommodate that amenity, you might be able to negotiate a cash settlement whereby you make an additional payment to the city to pay for them to build a park somewhere else. I want to thank you, David, for a great question. Unfortunately, it's a difficult one to answer because it's full of complexity and tons of landmines, and there's no quick or easy answer to your question. Hopefully, this discussion helps you navigate through the maze and ask the relevant questions from the decision makers who can hopefully answer your specific questions pertaining to that particular property and your proposed development. As you think about that, have an awesome rest of your day. Go make some great things happen. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.